I hate humans, young Phoenix thought for the 1,000th time as he rushed through the dark streets. It was way past curfew, and he had no excuse to be out here. Should he be discovered, the humans would surely deport him to one of their experimentation camps. If they didn't kill him right on the spot, that is. As he continued his dangerous journey, cautious for every sign of a human patrol or security drone, he involuntarily had to think about the countless atrocities they had committed against his people. The Gap had been a peaceful species, Gap Prime a paradise. Just 2 centuries before humanity's arrival, they had defeated world hunger, discovered the secrets of clean energy, and started to colonize their star system. A century ago, Gap scientists had unlocked FTL travel, which led to the colonization of a dozen neighboring star systems during the following decades. Then humanity appeared. Technologically, they were centuries ahead. Within weeks, they had crushed the Gap's military forces and occupied their planets. All systems were quarantined, the Gap stripped of their ability of FTL travel. The humans installed curfews and started large-scale deportations of Gap across continents, planets, and even entire star systems. At the beginning of their rule, they had abducted thousands into their experimentation camps. The few Gap that had returned spread tales of horrific experiments. While the frequency and scale of these abductions had diminished, dozens of Gap were abducted every week after being scanned by a human security drone. But the worst that they had done happened right at the beginning of their rule, 2 decades ago. In an act of random barbarity, the humans had completely annihilated the Orcs system. While they had tried to keep it under wraps, some transmissions had reached the neighboring systems. These revealed that the humans had blown up the star Vorok, sterilizing the entire star system of all life. Phoenix shook his head to get rid of the memories. He had to focus. Fortunately, he had almost reached his destination, an old abandoned warehouse. Their leader Zephyr was waiting for him. After reaching the warehouse, he slipped in, only to be greeted by a dozen Gap pointing weapons at him. "Phoenix, were you followed?" One of the Gap bellowed at him. "If I had Visago, we would already be dead." "Stop it, you two," another Gap proclaimed. "We detect no human activity. Bring me the data core, Phoenix." Everyone could hear that Zephyr was impatient. Immediately after receiving it, the old Gap connected the human data core to Gap computers and started his attempts to bypass human encryption. Before the occupation, Zephyr had been a brilliant computer programmer, hacker, and inventor. For the past 2 decades, he had also extensively studied human technology and language. If someone could crack it, it was him. "I hope it was worth it, leader. We lost over 24 Gap in the attack on the Human Security Center," Phoenix recalled with sorrow. "Oh my boy. You cannot begin to imagine the information present in this data core. I am sorry for our losses, but it would have been worth 10 times the casualties. It would have been worth the entire resistance movement. Never before had we managed to secure a human data core. The information and the intelligence on it might be the first step in driving of the invaders. If we can understand their motivation, if we can understand and replicate their technology, we might—" Zephyr stopped mid-sentence. "Something is wrong," he begun. "This shouldn't—" The resistance leader didn't get a chance to finish his sentence. Out of the data core came a powerful energy surge that engulfed the entire warehouse in a bright flash of light. Most Gap were knocked unconscious immediately. The few ones that didn't witnessed the storming of the warehouse by human occupation forces. They didn't need to follow Phoenix. They needed him to deliver the data core. These were Zephyr's last thoughts before fading into darkness. When the Gap awoke, he was not in a laboratory or an interrogation cell, but some form of conference room. 2 human soldiers were with him. When they saw that he had regained consciousness, one soldier spoke into his communicator. A minute later, a human in white clothing appeared. "Ah, Leader Zephyr, my apologies for the rather rude surprise, but we had to make sure to capture you. Your resistance was becoming rather bothersome to us." "Nothing compared to your occupation," the old Gap shot back. The human just laughed. "We are used to this kind of resentment, an unfortunate consequence of our actions. We bear the burden on our shoulder with pride, though, because recently we have made a major breakthrough, and as the leader of the resistance, we want you to become our representative." Zephyr exploded. "Me a collaborator? Never. The human sighed and nodded to one of the soldiers. Seconds later, the room went dark and the central screen sprung to life. It was filled with recordings, figures, and data. A millennium ago, shortly before your species entered the industrial age, humanity was dragged into an unfortunate war between the Galactic Federation and the Asmodai. With our help, the Federation ultimately prevailed. But before their defeat, the Asmodai let loose upon the galaxy a vile biological weapon, a virus, a disease, which threatened to annihilate the entire cosmos. It was eventually dubbed the Scourge. The screen showed recordings of battles and horribly alien and disfigured creatures. Before blowing up their home planet and their entire species with it, the Asmodai had sent thousands of virus carrying probes into the galaxy, infecting hundreds of advanced and primitive races alike. For some reason, we as the only species were immune to this scourge. As such, we were tasked by the Federation to cleanse the galaxy and do everything to protect it. With a heavy heart we did. We sterilized continents, moons, and planetes. We blew up entire solar systems and annihilated entire civilizations. Zephyr could not believe the mayhem he witnessed on the screens. Then Vorach had to be destroyed to wipe out the infestation, the human answered. All the deportations and quarantines and experiments, Zephyr started, were attempts to save what could be saved and prevent the spread of the virus. We believe that one of your scout parties in the Vorach system discovered an Asmodai probe and infected themselves. That's why this system was beyond saving, because it was the first, and why the infestation in all other systems was minimal and could be handled with less severe measures. Members of your species that were abducted were in fact infected. Our drones are actually not there for security or occupation, but to locate gap infected with the disease. Luckily, the virus needs years to reach its terminal destructive and most infectious stage, giving us time to prevent the spread. Why didn't you tell us? Zephyr exploded. What the human said was insane, but he was willing to believe it. Otherwise, their actions of the past 2 decades made no sense. You could have told us. We could have worked together. The human just smiled. An alien species just comes along and asks you nicely to quarantine yourselves, stop FTL travel, shift your populations between continents and planets, because of some scary virus that your technology probably cannot detect while no one is sick yet. Oh, and by the way, these aliens need thousands of your species members to be handed over to them in order to experiment on them to find a cure. And they also need to destroy some of your planets and blow up some of your stars in order to save you and the galaxy. The human shook its head. Didn't work with the first 4 infected species that we encountered. As a result, we lost 3 of them. The ones trying to flee from us spread the disease across 100 systems. Believe me, we tried the soft approach. And what do you want from me now? Zephyr asked. After 2 decades, we finally isolated the genetic marker the virus uses to attack and eventually alter and kill your species. We can now distribute the cure. But we need a respected figure to convince your people to not resist. If just one infected escapes us, the virus could mutate and adapt, and we would have to start the process all over again. And this is not an attempt to wipe out my people? The old Gap asked verily. If we wanted to destroy you, we would have done so already. Actually, the Federation Resource Division urges us to hurry up the process because we discovered a fascinating mineral on your planet that they want to get their hands on. I accept, Zephyr replied with hesitation. Excellent. We will prepare a broadcast. Thank you for your cooperation. Zephyr wondered if he had just condemned his species to annihilation or saved them all.